The following is a conversation. It has the features of any conversation, such as imperfectly expressed thoughts, ill-considered opinions, and the notions of several sleep-deprived brains. Try not to get your stethoscope in a twist about it.
Hey, you guys, should I be thinking more about the Roman Empire?
Oh my goodness.
What?
This has been...
Is there something wrong with me that I don't think about the Roman Empire?
My wife asked me this question, and I hadn't been on TikTok in a couple of weeks, so I didn't understand the context. And I sat there for a second. I was like, babe, I don't think about any empire. Like, that's just not how my mind works.
I asked my boyfriend. He said he does not think about it unless he watches Gladiator.
Well,
and then he
do
says
think
like
about
20
it.
times a day.
I just watched Gladiator,
Yeah.
and it's been on my mind a little bit.
Okay.
I've been looking at Marcus Aurelius and Commodus.
Okay.
I honestly think that just like my algorithm has just populated that for me.
Okay. All right. Well,
When
yeah.
prompted, I do have thoughts on somebody like Commodus, right? Like fighting giraffes in the arenas. Even back then, they were like, this is dumb. It's not
I didn't know he did that.
Yeah, and everybody in the audience was like,
was killing
this is the
giraffes.
least like aggressive animal. What are you doing? They're like, this
It's
is
like
so
an
dumb.
herbivore.
Yeah. It's like all it's gonna do is walk away from you. And he's like, I'm a man because I can fight a giraffe. They're like, what is wrong with you?
Terrible, dude.
So this is why he was a bad emperor, because he just
bad.
wanted to be a cool guy swinging swords.
He's like the Dave Etler of emperors, you know, like he just wants to make people eat weird things for the podcast.
Yeah, he's got his hobbies, and they're like, rule the empire, and he's like, or just do my hobbies.
Meandering in the margins of medicine, it's the Shortcoat Podcast.
Weird news,
Fresh views
helpful clues, and interviews.
by students for students.
Subscribe to our weekly show at theshortcoat.com.
Welcome back to the Shortcoat Podcast. It's the show that gives you an inside look at medical school from the students drinking from that fire hose. It's a production of the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. I'm Dave Etler. With me today in the SCP studio, he's gained international fame as a professional apologizer for YouTube celebrities. It's M2, Jeff Goddard.
God, that's so true.
Her freestyle vacuuming skills are sought after by such celebrities as Eric Estrada and John Goslin. It's M1, Fallon Jung.
Hi.
He rose to fame as the world's quietest yodeler. It's M2, Eric Vallon.
Hello.
And she's no doubt about to join their famous ranks, making her debut on this podcast. It's the newest director of our Writing and Humanities program and my colleague, Katie Prisky.
Hello.
Eric, Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Eric, I always like to get to know y'all a little better. Your first time on the show.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were before you arrived at CCOM, and why medicine?
So I was in Idaho before CCOM. I was raised in Montana, and then I moved to Idaho right before high school. I wanted to do medicine because in college I just kind of started to graduate towards the sciences. I was undecided until I decided. And basically I just got a bunch of experience. I shadowed a bunch of different things, dentistry, nursing, and then shadowed a bunch of doctors. And it just seemed really cool. You just kind of a lifelong learner. It's super cheesy, but I like learning. I don't like dwelling on something for too long. And so it just kind of fit. And in my opinion, this is also cheesy, but health is the most important thing that a person has, and being able to navigate that with people and help people in the most important, thing in this life is just kind of an honor. So that's why I wanted to do it.
Well, great. It's a great answer. It's like I warned you that we were gonna. Did I warn you?
I don't know. I
didn't warn you.
I got no warning about anything.
Yeah, Katie got invited on the show like 15 minutes ago, and
true.
She's being a good sport. Katie, I told you that you didn't have to prepare anything, and you really don't.
I'm counting on it.
But tell us about you.
What do you want to know?
I want to know something similar. Why? What did you do before you came here, and why are you here now?
Good question. So I grew up in Iowa, and I have been back in Iowa City for about 5 years. Prior to coming over to the College of Medicine, I have been working on my PhD in the College of Education, also at the University of Iowa. And I know the previous director, Kate, and saw this job was open and talked to her about it, and here I am.
And how do you feel about that decision so far? How do you feel about working with me, Dave Etler?
I feel pretty good about it. So far, so good, I would say. Wouldn't you?
Absolutely, I would. But, you never know what other people think of you.
It's true.
Thank you for.
And you can definitely count on her to give you like total honesty, considering her office is 10 feet from yours,
and on a podcast that people listen to. Yeah. For sure. Well, again, thank you for agreeing to join us.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me.
So I guess there is always a national physician shortage, but I don't know. Like for some reason, it got some attention from NBC News this week. They did a whole piece on it, a whole minute and 36 seconds or something. And I thought we could talk about this shortage because, I'm not really sure I understand why there is always a physician shortage.
So,
but I kind of have thoughts about it, but I'm not sure that they're correct. What do you Jeff, you wanted to talk about this too. What?
I'm just going to myth bust real quick. There has not always been a physician shortage, even by the people that are pushing that there is a physician shortage.
Okay,
right?
Okay.
Within the last few decades, the AMA specifically said, like, we're on track to have too many physicians. That was a concern, I think, in the 80s. And that was part of like the tightening the belt of applications to medical school, which makes sense when we're talking about the AMA, whose job it is to secure the financial success of their members who are physicians.
Sure. Fewer doctors, more money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was my myth bust. I'll let anybody else jump in.
So what you're saying is we don't have a physician shortage?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the idea that we have, quote unquote, always had a physician shortage is not true. We have gone through cycles of people thinking that we have too many. We have gone through people thinking we have not enough.
Yeah.
So what is this most recent idea about this physician shortage? Like, where is this coming from now?
I feel like I've heard it my whole life. I feel like there's just, as long as I've been around, approximately 27 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was looking at some statistics. 99.1% of positions were filled in the 2023 match.
It's about 1% that didn't.
Yeah, I mean, about 1% that didn't. And so you would think, okay, well, that is some measure of the idea that there might be a shortage of physicians. If there were, say more positions that weren't filled, you might go, okay, we have enough physicians in the workforce. That would be somewhat bad news for medical students, but for the profession as a whole.
The problem with the field of medicine, specifically physicians, is that it is a very manipulated market. That's not inherently a bad thing, but there are several steps in the process to getting to a physician where somebody gets to decide how tight that bottleneck is going to be, which means because somebody is trying to decide that, it's not the market, and it kind of makes it a little bit harder to judge what the actual number of doctors should be, right? So how many residency spots are we going to have is largely determined by how much hospitals want to spend, which is 0, and how much the federal government is going to spend on those trainings, which is going to be limited because they don't want to spend more money than they have to, right? Which makes sense. That's how everybody spends money. So how are we deciding how many residents are being trained every year? It's always going to be a conversation. Same with how many medical students are being taught in medical school, right? Those are the manufactured markets, or even to a real extent, how many people are getting into college. But those are manufactured bottlenecks that limit how many physicians are entering the workforce. And then when you get to actual people going out and being able to practice, you're kind of dealing with this delay of supply that you can't really reasonably predict.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've heard similar things. As far as what I know, you probably know more than I, Jeff, but it's all about the residency positions that you're creating, basically, and the government pays for those residency positions. So they only have to dole out so many positions per year, and they don't really add to those new. Like, they don't create new residency positions as far as what I know, or they haven't in a long time.
I think they have recently, but it's definitely not kept up with the need. I mean, America's population is aging, so that's a big factor.
Sure. Yeah, I have an interesting story. I was talking to a urologist. They're historically like a pretty quote unquote burnt out specialty in today's day and age. They work a lot. They have a lot of variability in their practice. Their call is pretty brutal. It's because they got their residency positions bottlenecked like in the 80s or 90s. I was talking to a urologist about this. And because he had, I think, 15 people match in urology his year in school. And so they bottlenecked the residencies. And now, because of that, because so many people were going in the 80s and 90s, now there's just not enough of them.
Yeah, and he's sort of, or she is sort of looking at retirement at this point, as are a lot of physicians. And so that's going to create its own special contribution to this problem. Katie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking about this not from the physician perspective, but from the patient perspective, and someone that grew up in a rural town in Iowa where there used to be a hospital there. There's no longer a hospital. There are no doctors at all in my hometown. You have to drive at least 20 minutes, I think, to see a doctor, and to get to an actual hospital, I don't know, 45 minutes. And so thinking about like the way that rural healthcare plays into this conversation, especially in Iowa, and where physician openings at, where physicians moving, where their positions.
Yeah.
See, that's one of the big conversations is you have organizations like the AMC. They are essentially the body that decides medical schools, right? They have a stake in this because they want more people to go to medical school because that means that they're getting more money, right? They want more people applying to residency.
So cynical, Jeff. So cynical.
Well, it's their business model, right? It's not necessarily that it's completely disaligned with society. Of course, we also want doctors, right? So, but we should be aware of their incentives, right? The same with them applying to residency, because the AAMC gets money for people applying to residencies, right? The AMA has an incentive to try to up the value of their members so that their pay can be commensurate to what they think it should be, right? I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with either of those incentives as long as we are aware of them, right?
Yeah.
The problem isn't as so much a physician shortage as it is an allocation issue, right? Saying that we're going to train, say, 10% more doctors doesn't guarantee that any of that 10% of doctors are going to end up in small towns in Iowa.
Yeah.
That's an incentive issue that has to be addressed completely separate of supply.
Right? Yeah, maybe one of the things I thought of, and I think is probably just absolutely absurd, is maybe the match should also take into account geographical need or distribution, as well as the need of the students or the applicants in the programs. So, hey, there's a Nobel Prize in there somewhere, again, for the next person who develops this match algorithm.
In a very real sense, that's what it was intended to do, right? Because before it was you were applying to residencies as a student. You were just kind of whatever, and residency programs were basically trying to hire like second-year medical students, right? Because they were trying to get ahead of the curve, But that was the issue, was this allocation problem, is that you would have hospitals that had tons of people, and then you had hospitals that didn't have anybody at all, and then you had communities that were suffering because of it. In large part, the match came from a desire to make sure that this scarce resource that is a societal benefit is more equitably distributed. Not that it solved it perfectly, but it's a heck ton better than the Wild West that it was before. Does it need to be revisited? Sure, maybe. I'm okay
these things always need to be revisited, and we never revisit them.
Right.
Well, we don't revisit them until the problem is super acute. Maybe now's the time, guys. I don't know.
Yeah.
On the plus side, if you're a resident, if you're a senior resident, you're super good. Forbes reported last week that the majority of residents, 56%, are receiving 100 or more job solicitation offers during training. The highest number since 1991, when the AMN Healthcare Physician Solutions company first started surveying final year residents. So that's up from 30% getting more than 100 solicitations in 2021. Yeah. So big jump.
Yeah. And a fun history lesson for those that are less aware. In the 90s, when we talked about the physician shortage, it was getting more kids into medical school. We don't talk about it that way as much now.
We're opening medical schools.
That's why.
All the time. Yeah. I mean, there's
dozens of schools have opened in the last 20 years, which is, historically speaking, this is like one of our biggest increases in the number of schools. The question of how well those schools are regulated, or if we need to revisit a Flexner report, is probably a conversation for somebody else. But
well, and also it does nothing to address the thing that you already discussed, which is the limited number of residency slots that are available.
It just moved the bottleneck.
Right.
Yeah, which is why we're talking now about, can we increase residency spots? I personally was in Washington, D.C. this spring with the AMA to discuss increasing residency spots on some of the legislation that they were going through the House. And I have met with lawmakers specifically for the specialty that I'm interested in. Obviously, I'm a little biased, but I think there'll be a spot for me. But I think honestly that particular specialty needs more focus, an increase in funding, for residency spots. So I've done that advocacy work as well. But
Physical medicine, preventive medicine.
Preventive medicine, yeah.
Is your choice.
Yeah. Preventive medicine it's like, so it is not primary care in and of itself, but like primary care, we can demonstrate that when people of that specialty are in a community, the improvement of health of the community increases significantly more than most subspecialties, right? So if you have a cardiologist in community, he or she can make a significant impact on the community, hopefully for the better, right? But he's not going to have the impact that the primary care physician is going to have, because the primary care physician targets everything and everybody, right?
It's prevention versus like disaster control.
Exactly.
But people don't make money off of prevention, except for maybe you, who's going to prevention. And that's probably part of a problem as to why people don't want to push that further up the chain. Obviously it's what people want for public health, but not necessarily for the
Admittedly, preventive medicine is one of the lowest paid specialties, specifically because there isn't a lot of procedure involved, and we have a fee-for-service system.
Yep.
So, but there was that bill pushed through the House, or being pushed through the House, that's focused more on compensating better on value-based care, so more on keeping patients healthy as opposed to how many procedures can you do. That's a step in the right direction, but that's not fixing this problem of whether or not we have doctors in rural medicine, right?
So out of curiosity, is there such thing as like a preventative medicine doctor, or is it somebody who is in primary care that has a specialty,
for lack of a better word?
Fellowship.
Yeah. So preventive medicine. So there are two words, preventive and preventative. They both mean the same thing. Doesn't matter. But the specialty itself is called preventive medicine.
Oh, okay.
One fewer syllables. And it is an actual like board certified specialty, has existed since the 60s, but it's very small because it's not reimbursed through Medicare. So its residencies aren't trained using Medicare funding because, like children, the populations that they are serving aren't predominantly Medicare patients. And so Medicare doesn't pay for children's hospitals. Medicare doesn't pay for preventive medicine training. Fortunately, we really like kids, so we find other funding for that. But that's in large part why pediatricians make significantly less than other physicians. They're not paid through Medicare. Gotcha. Which is a national program. They're paid generally through Medicaid, which is a state program. And so their reimbursement rates are lower. Same with preventive medicine. Their reimbursement rates are lower because they're not doing procedures, and they're definitely not doing Medicare procedures.
And Medicare funding is the primary way of funding residency slots.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, the real solution is finding a way to make sure that we are incentivizing people to go into primary care and incentivizing people to go to places that were needed. The video that Dave's talking about, the NBC one, they talked about this primary care doctor in this tiny little town in Alabama, I think, and she's going to retire, but she can't retire because there's not another doctor there, right? And so people are like, but if we trained more doctors, we could solve this if there were more doctors. And she specifically says in the video, like, there have been other doctors, they've left.
Yeah, they're like,
okay,
see ya.
It's not the fact that there isn't a large enough pool to pull from. It's that nobody wants to live there and practice medicine for other reasons.
Yeah, much as I enjoy your Piggly Wiggly, I'm out.
Yeah.
Piggly Wiggly. There's not Piggly Wigglies in Iowa, Dave.
Might be in Alabama. I don't know.
Wisconsin.
Florida.
In Wisconsin. I do love a Piggly Wiggly, but
I
have
honestly
to go
have
to
no idea what a
Wisconsin to go.
Piggly Wiggly even
It's
is.
a
Grocery store.
Oh, I thought you were actually talking about pigs. I was like, isn't Iowa known for pigs? Like, isn't this
Jeff,
Why aren't there
Big old
Piggly
pig on
Wigglies?
it.
Get on this Piggly Wiggly Corporation of America, whatever they're called.
Please sponsor us.
Yeah. Shortcoats, we love to hear from you, no matter what it's about. So call us at 347-SHORT-CT with questions, shower thoughts, complaints about your situation, whatever you like. We'll talk about it on the show.
There are some smaller programs that do incentivize people to go into primary care. So, for example, like I'm thinking of the National Health Corps Scholarship, which basically takes people and says, hey, we will pay for all of your medical school. We'll give you a stipend, but you have to go into primary care after you're done, and you have to do service in a high need area, which we will decide what that need is for how many every years we decide. So usually it's 4 full-time or 8 half-time.
Yeah. And there have been other solutions proposed. There was one in one of these Midwestern states. I'm so sorry for people that are from here. I don't remember them all. people that didn't match were able to go train under a primary care physician for a year and then essentially practice medicine in a reduced capacity, but in a primary care capacity, right?
I like that as an option.
As an option,
yes.
right? Like, I'm not saying it has to be the end all be all.
Like, you don't have to, push people into that when they don't. I think
a full third of medical schools in the country have some kind of accelerated program specifically for those that are trying to go into primary care. So a lot of schools, you can do 3 years of medical school if you're going into primary care.
Yeah.
Because, you don't really need all of that other stuff if you're sure this is what you're going to do. Yeah. And so there's this huge incentive to do it, right?
The other thing that I think about is that there are medical schools. So, like, for example, NYU is one of those schools that said, hey, we have a physician shortage. We specifically need more primary care doctors. And so they took away tuition so that they could get more people to come into medical school in the first place and kind of stop people from having that financial barrier of getting in.
Which is a big problem, right? We've talked about it on the show many times. The more you spend on medical school, the more you're going to the more money you're going to want to make when you're done. Exactly. And so you're not going to go into primary care as readily for that reason.
Yeah.
And I understand that this is a political football that people are going to kick down the road until, like you said, it becomes so acute that we can't do anything but solve it. But purely from a fiscal perspective, which, as we've talked about, I'm a little too analytical and too concerned about numbers, it makes so much more sense to say we will pay for medical school as a society. We're going to pay for medical school for anybody that can get in and finish. But you will not be compensated over the course of your career as much. And I think evening out the specialties is more reasonable.
Yeah. Or
because patients aren't really very sympathetic to the concept of a doctor saying, I should be compensated more. Bro, you've got 2 boats. Yeah. And you're talking to somebody who's on food stamps. They're not on your side on this issue. Yeah. They're not going to be.
It's hard to, it's hard to be sympathetic to that point of view. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm not saying that physicians shouldn't be fairly compensated. I'm going into this specialty. I would like to be able to feed my child, right? But at the same time, like, recognizing that there has to be some kind of limit, and it makes much more sense to say we're going to have that limit, but also you're not going to have this $400,000 worth of debt. Yeah. And that makes it a little bit easier to suggest, hey, why wouldn't you go into primary care? You have the same amount of debt as somebody who isn't going into primary care. Now it's a lot more financially feasible.
Now you can make a decision on whether to go into one specialty or another based on your interests also, rather than some pressure that your pocketbook feels.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other big change that would have to be made, and I apologize to anybody who's having to listen to me. I've read book on this subject because this is my whole life. We have to move to a value-based system. We have to move away from fee-for-service medicine, because it's really tempting to say, I'm just going to do that $5,000 procedure day in and day out and make my $800,000. It doesn't really matter that I didn't have debt. That still looks kind of nice.
Well, yeah. And I mean, what you're suggesting is also a move away from, we live in a capitalist society, so you're incentivized to do things for more money.
Yeah. And so if you
everything
are paid,
is fee for service.
Right. Yeah. Not just medicine.
Yeah. But there are forms of medicine. So if you guys don't know about ChenMed, it's one of my favorite examples. It's not the only one, but ChenMed they're in like 13 different states at this point, but they started out in Florida, and all of their patients were elderly patients. I think they specialize in geriatric medicine, and they take a monthly payment for each of their patients, and they just take care of them. And some patients are in there every single day because that's what they need. And some patients are, they come in a few times a month.
Is this a company? What is this?
Yeah, so it was started as a private practice.
And concierge medicine is
kind of what it sounds
that's
like.
what I was thinking.
It sounds like concierge medicine, but they specifically target geriatric and poor patients all on Medicare. Okay. That's all they do. And they do it in such a way that it's not fee for service. Capitated payment is essentially taking care of you get an amount and you benefit more financially if you do... If they are healthier, because that means you have to do fewer procedures, right?
Sure.
It's not the only model. There are certainly other forms of either concierge or other medicines that work in this model that are specifically targeting populations that need healthcare more than others, right? Like poor patients, older patients. But to ask the entire system to move to that it's kind of hard to do, I get why doctors in New York, for example, my family's in New York, doctors would stop doing private practice for Medicaid patients and start doing concierge service for people on the Upper East Side. You start making, $2,000 every patient visit. Yeah, I can see why you would want to switch
It's hard
to
to
that.
ignore.
Yeah, financial incentive is there.
Yeah.
For places like ChenMed, I would assume that they don't take insurance. Is that correct?
So they work with every state that they're in. They've partnered with either the Medicare or the Medicaid to figure out how they're going to get insured. The patients themselves aren't paying for it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
it's
really
usually the
interesting.
local governments that are paying for it. And it's a model that at first you're like, it doesn't seem like it would work, but then they keep expanding, And I use them as an example because they're the largest one that I know of, but they're not the only organization that does stuff like that. There's another one in Scottsdale, Arizona that I am just besotted with. They are a clinic that they have dietitians on staff, they have personal trainers on staff, they have like pool tables and like a community center. And so the whole point of the clinic is to make sure that you are overall healthy. And the doctors who run it are one of the people that the patient sees the least, because they just don't need their specialty. They need a dietitian. They need somebody who's going to go grocery shopping with them and help them pick out good, healthy food within their budget,
That's awesome. That's so cool.
And they didn't start it out to make money, but it is profitable.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's self-sustaining. They don't need outside funding in order to keep going. So these models, you're right, it is shifting away from our fee-for-service capitalist approach to medicine. But I mean, let's be honest. Hospitals started, the whole concept of hospitals started to take care of poor people. Like,
Sure,
we didn't have any other way to take care of them, so we're going to put them all in one room, and we're going to, as a society, raise some funds and take care of poor people. And now it's become
What do you
business?
think that was the reason? So my understanding of that is really it was to keep sick people or poor sick people away from the general population.
So, I mean, these are two different concepts, right? There's definitely the idea of asylum, which is a factor, right? But it's also just the idea of indigent hospitals have been a concept in America and in Europe for, I don't know, since the concept of modern medicine, really, for the last several hundred years.
And maybe we call them now community hospitals.
Yeah.
A lot of the time. Like, my general sense of those kinds of community hospitals is that they serve, the community that they're in, but also that they're usually in areas where, there might not be a big university hospital or something like that.
But it's typically you go to rich people and you get their money because they feel like they need to get back. And so they do, in the form of, here is a hospital, right? Or the doctors that are working in that, they're not trying to keep people away from the rest of society. They're trying to take care of these people. One of my favorite examples is in New York, is now owned by New York Presbyterian, but it used to be the hospital that the Black Sisters opened up. The doctor's Black. It was just poor women and children, and that's what they took care of. And they also use it as a training hospital for the first women physicians in the country. And now we've very much shifted to a model of hospitals are a business that have to be self-sustaining and are not charity-based,
and that
for better or worse.
Yeah, and that might be owned by investors that want you to make money and keep making more money and grow.
Yeah.
Growth is such a weird concept for me in business. Like what? How strange is it that you always need to be growing, always grow? Why can't you just keep doing something good?
Then you're not making more money. Everyone wants more money.
Man,
More money.
Come on.
Yeah, there are absolutely some people that are happy with where their business has grown to and stay there, but that is absolutely not the majority.
That would be me.
Yeah.
I would be like, if I had a business that made enough money to keep me and my family alive, I'd be totally cool with that. But I'm not an ambitious man.
Well, the thing is that a company isn't a person, right? A company is an organism made up of many individuals.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pressure from all sides on that. But that said, I'm not trying to say that business getting into medicine has been wholly bad. Like, there have been some really good things that have come from it. Right?
Sure. I mean, I assume that a lot of advances have come because, somebody saw that they could make a profit if they only knew X, Y, or Z. And so they studied that and they came up with,
Yeah, but Eli Whitney was able to mass produce insulin. These two guys in a lab in Toronto were like, okay, we can take it. We can isolate it from, they use dogs to treat our patients with diabetes. And then they spent a whole year to get this insulin to treat a patient for 30 minutes because they just didn't have enough, right? And there was no way to mass produce it. Eli Whitney comes in, they give them the patent for $1, right, to the university, and then Eli Whitney gets in and they mass produce insulin, and it kept patients alive.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly arduous process. I mean, you can understand amylase is also made in the pancreas. Amylase will eat the insulin. So turns out it's very difficult to isolate just the insulin from a pancreas. So, but I can understand that. But a business got involved, and a business has saved patients' lives because of it, right? And it's not the only case in medicine that this has happened. Business is has an enormous power to do good in the world and in healthcare, but it can't be the only thing. If we're only chasing dollars, then it gets awkward. And if dollars become a priority over taking care of the patients, it also becomes a bit of a problem, right? And that's my fundamental disagreement with organizations like the AMA. Like, I'm a member of the AMA. I'm happy to go advocate with them on issues that are involving patient rights or keeping physicians healthy and safe, right? Keeping our communities in a way that works for us. And I have advocated several times with them. But then every now and again, they'll push an issue, and I'm like, this feels more like you were concerned with doctors continuing to be a privileged class in society, as opposed to what's going to be best for the patients, what's going to be best for the system. And I understand that everybody has to advocate for themselves because nobody else will, but at the same time, like, we're doing okay. You know, I don't know if we need an extra slice of this pie.
I always joke that I'll be the first to sign up for a brain implant that helps me remember things. I almost everything I've ever read, or the things that my wife tells me are important, I can't remember them. I'm sorry, world. I can't remember what you want me to remember. But for now, I think I'm going to pass on Elon Musk's Neuralink.
Did he come out with that?
So it's ready for human trials.
Okay.
Neuralink says.
Okay. Have they done animal testing?
Yes, they have. And that is the problem that I'm about to highlight. Public records and interviews depict a sort of a grim picture of Neuralink's animal testing results, including complications like partial paralysis and brain swelling in monkeys and things like that. Now,
sure.
So Elon is like, no monkeys have died due to Neuralink's implants. They were terminally ill and did not die as a result of the implants. That's what he's stated. But,
they were just comatose.
They had taken care to select subjects that were already close to death. But people seem pretty suspicious about this claim. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine has called on the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission to investigate Musk's statements, claiming that they are misleading. And, Elon Musk likes to say things on Twitter that influences stock price, and so the SEC hates that, and so they keep asking him not to do that, but
I think he just likes to rouse rabble.
I think so too.
He's just a rabble
he's a
rouser.
provocateur. I think that's his thing, and multiple federal investigations have already been launched concerning Neuralink's animal testing practices and safety protocols. But
wow,
they do have FDA approval for human trials aiming to enable people with paralysis to control computer interfaces with their brains. So here's my question that I wanted to maybe toss around a little, or maybe it's a dumb question. What place do tech bros have in advancing such technologies that could alleviate human suffering? And this sort of ties in with our previous conversation a little bit. And how can we make sure that, people like Elon have an ethical framework to use with their financial motives?
I don't know about the second part, but I think it does have a place eventually in the future. I don't know if our technology is necessarily there quite yet, but I do know people use, or they're developing like retinal implants that can help people see. It stimulates the retina and the optic nerve.
But who's developing those implants? My impression is that a lot of those developments, yes, you highlighted insulin as a sort of business opportunity that somebody took advantage of and did a good thing with. But, when a lot of times, like from my perspective, a lot of times these advances come from universities that studied them first, and then the people involved in those studies commercialized them. So they started out with an emphasis on ethics, at least lately. It wasn't always the case in medicine, but
I would venture to say that the basis, the foundation of any technology that would be used by an organization like Neuralink is not made whole cloth in the company. They are standing on the shoulders of their industries, their academic industry, right? A fine example would be these vaccines came out recently, right?
Yeah.
These mRNA vaccines within the last few years. That is a novel approach to vaccines. That technology is not, right? And it is not something that Pfizer came up with, or Moderna, or anybody else that's tried to use mRNA to deliver a vaccine. mRNA is inside of every living being, so, that's already there, right? But second, using mRNA to deliver genetic information to other cells is something we've been doing for 15 plus years before this, right? a company just use that technology, that use that shared information that we get from academia and applied it in a very specific way that for them was commercially successful. And then we can go back to arguing whether or not capitalism worked well for us during the pandemic. But I think the same thing with Neuralink. I think that there are definitely people that are pushing the envelope in the company to reach an economical goal, but it's not like they aren't using the same knowledge that has been gained in academia that's been studied for probably decades at this point that has built up to this. And also these types of projects, in order to get the approval to do these types of projects, a lot of the times, especially human trials, ethicists are involved. Like, this isn't something that you can just do to people, right? The government straight up doesn't allow you to do this unless there are ethical considerations.
Yeah, and that's a position that, the articles that I've read kind of didn't cover as much.
Yeah.
That there must be some oversight.
You'd
involved.
hope so.
I mean, you've got to get an IRB to do human trials, and IRB, institutional review boards, are awfully
animal
picky.
Trials too.
Yeah,
like, this is
true. Yeah.
Written into federal law. This isn't like Elon Musk is running around as an individual poking monkeys. Like, he has an entire academic and scientific team that has had to go through some pretty rigorous regulation to get to this point, right?
So isn't it possible, though, that he's just in his lab with a bunch of monkeys, or not him, but his Techbro and scientists are in a lab with a bunch of monkeys poking around at them, and sort of outside the IRB process.
Right.
I do think that's very possible.
Because IRB is through institutions, right? Like,
that's right.
If it's a private, if it's a private,
I mean, if they're getting to human trials, yes, there is going to be some. If the FDA has approved it,
sure,
they've at least looked at this with an ethical framework.
But everybody that works in medical technology, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or a tech company like this, all of them require, anytime they're doing these types of studies, they require approval from a national agency, right? So
approval for medical technology and medical devices and equipment is pretty shaky, though.
That's fair.
The process of getting things approved there's many roundabout ways and there's many loopholes.
Because you can say, for instance, that my device is very much like other devices that already exist.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And you get a fast track.
And so you get a fast track, and so you may be doing something very novel with an interface that superficially looks like a retinal implant that you mentioned before that does a thing safely, but you may also be doing something that's different enough that it's not a good idea.
Yeah, there was a problem with knee implants, and I think that these implants are still on the market, knees and hips, and they're these cobalt implants, and they're in the medical device company or in the medical device industry, so they got a fast track because biomechanically these implants do the same thing as the previous material implants, and they're giving people like cobalt poisoning.
Sure. Yeah, there's another case with, what's the word for when you don't want to get pregnant?
Birth control?
Birth control.
Yes. Sounds like basically birth control.
So we're looking for when you don't want to get pregnant.
Problems with birth control implants where they were, of course, approved for human use, but it turns out that they migrated around the body and had all kinds
they were like
Yes.
the metal ones.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got the right.
It is prophylaxis.
Spirit.
It is
technically. You've got the right spirit.
Yeah.
I prefer to use fancy words that I don't.
I certainly
when I don't know them.
Let me take my birth prophylaxis.
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yeah, I guess my only concern with this whole thing is what we were talking about with like the concept of growth, especially with companies. And for him, I mean, obviously he is an incredibly intelligent person, right? And he's shown that he's so good at doing things, right?
Yeah.
He can build things. He's made all sorts of rocket ships, like things that we would have never thought were even possible even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know. But now I wonder if he's growing for the sake of growth and not for
altruist, so one of his big things with SpaceX is, moving people off the planet so that, basically as a bulwark against some catastrophic, disaster that happens to humanity. If we're on another planet, we don't have to worry if the asteroid hits the Earth, the species will continue. And that was what one of his stated goals.
Yeah. Right. But do we trust Elon Musk? Do we want to put our
I do.
faith in humanity and
Eric,
our hope for humanity?
wholeheartedly.
Take us to Mars,
Take us to
Elon.
Mars.
To be
Do
fair,
it.
he's not the only one going to Mars,
I'll
right?
go
Like
with you,
China's
bro.
going to Mars, the US is going to Mars. There are other companies going to Mars. He's just the one
Maybe
that,
he just made it popular.
yeah, well, one, yeah.
He made Mars cool.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with Tesla. Like he specifically said, like his goal with Tesla, and it should be pointed out that Elon isn't Tesla. Elon isn't SpaceX. There are thousands of people that work for these organizations that make it happen. Elon cannot personally build a rocket. He was just the first person dumb enough to say, "What if we built our own?"
Yeah.
You know, and it worked out. And now we save millions and upon millions in tax dollars every year because he did it. So I'm happy. But he took an idea and he said, I don't care that this is going to be the successful idea. I just care that it gets people talking about this idea and pushing it forward. He fully expected Tesla to fail, but he's like, well, if electric cars go forward, then we've won. As a civilization, we have won, even if my company fails. And you could take that statement at face value or not. It doesn't really matter, but like that has been the case, right? We have pushed forward and now we have more electric cars. The same thing with space, where commercial space flight, even if SpaceX failed, is now popular. Many other companies are doing it. India just landed on the moon.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure that would have happened if it weren't for things like SpaceX.
Yeah.
You know, like just the cultural conversation around it. And I think that's a beautiful thing for India to be able to say, we made it to the moon, you know?
But is Elon Musk or his company saying, hey, I am doing this for the cultural conversation? Like, I don't think that's his goal by any means. Like, I would think that,
Well, that
his
was
goal
his,
is just...
I mean, in a few of his company's cases, that was the stated goal. Whether it was the real goal or not, I think nobody can...
I don't think
And
that...
I'm
actually,
so much
no.
more skeptical of Elon Musk than all of you.
He really gives me supervillain vibes. Like,
Yes, same.
really bad.
I'm totally
Really?
fine with saying that he's a supervillain if that's what makes people happy, but I don't think that finances are his goal. And the reason that I think that is because he doesn't own a house. Like, he literally sleeps on the factory floor. So he's not really worried about his life of luxury. I think he is concerned about his legacy, which is a different conversation. He wants to be important in the human story.
Well, right.
Which
but
is also
that-
concerning.
No,
Yeah, I'm not saying that's like inherently
Notoriety or
concerning.
money
I'm just
or,
saying
like,
that is his goal, and if we know that,
notoriety.
Yeah,
like, what is the ethic
See,
in
but
that? You know?
I don't
Right.
necessarily know if his goal is notoriety. I mean, if you take what he says at face value, then his goal is advancing the knowledge and the science of the human race and technology.
Yeah.
And I mean, so far, that's what he's done.
Yeah, he happens to have enough influence that he can take his personal fears and address them. One of his personal fears is what happens if something happens to the Earth and we're only on Earth. So being a 2-planet species is better than being a 1-planet species. He has the resources to handle that. What happens is if AI takes over, that would be bad. I have the resources to create Neuralink where maybe that won't be as big a problem.
And let's face it, we're all kind of, on some level, doing something for our legacy. You know, like it may not, you know, we may not acknowledge it. You know, even I sometimes think doing this podcast, you know, the cool thing about it that I didn't really think about in the beginning, but now sometimes I think about is my voice is out there.
Yeah.
Forever.
It's true.
Immortalized.
So in that way, I have achieved a certain immortality. And
now I
kinda,
have.
pardon me. And now you have, Eric. And it's a part of me kind of likes that a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess my biggest concern...
So me and Elon Musk are exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically...
I don't know if I would claim that.
I guess my problem
I'm
with
going to
the
change the name of
conversation-
this podcast to X.
Oh, don't even think about that.
My
I
problem
support
with
it,
any conversation around Elon Musk is that, or both sides of it, some people want a villain, some people want a hero, and I just very few people fit into either one of those categories. He is just a dude who's trying to do something, and he happens to have enough resources that he's making some headway in the things that he's trying to do. Whether or not they should be things that we're doing is a conversation, but like he is not bad because he's doing the things that he wants to do, and he's not good because he's doing the things that he wants to do. He's just
and let's
doing
face it,
things
if I didn't work for the University of Iowa, if I was in charge of this thing, this podcast that I have, I would probably be making outrageous claims too, just to get attention, right? I mean, you know, but you know, I have to be careful that I have a job at the end of the week.
Sure.
I think the thing that makes me deeply uncomfortable about him is the fact that he has so many resources, and so he has so much say in what actually happens to people or monkeys or whatever. And while I think it's totally fine that people go around and do the things that they want, most people don't have the resources that he has, so they don't have as much say in what happens in the world. And so right now it's Elon's world, more or less. And the truth is, like, I could definitely give supervillain vibes if like I had as many resources as Elon Musk and Elon Musk had as many resources as me.
Well,
currently.
that's capitalism. I mean, that's what we were talking about before. He has enough resources because he's earned those resources for himself. Like all he's done is read books in his room for his entire life. Teach himself engineering and mathematics.
I guess I'm not really strong with the concept of earning, generally speaking, but I mean, he's put in some effort and it's gone well for him. And now, for better or worse, this is the world that we live in. He has those resources.
Well, here's the thing is that we're hyper-focused on Elon Musk right now, but I mean, there's millions of people that have as many resources in him and can be...
Well, not millions, but...
Definitely not millions.
There's a lot of people that have...
Yeah, I mean, like 5 years ago, we were dumping on Bezos because because we want a villain, right? We want to centralize the problems.
We're not going to say Bezos is a villain. Like that seems like a safe take, right?
I'm not saying whether or not he is a villain, but we want the guy, right? Because... our brains
I don't want the guy.
No, we want to be able to point to
say like this is your fault. Yeah.
Let me try this. Let me try this in a different way. We are a storytelling species. It is what we have always done since the beginning of humanity. And we like protagonists and we like antagonists because we like simplicity in our stories. Humanity has never been a story of protagonist and antagonist. It has always been a story of community, of groups coming together. But it's a lot harder to tell a story to empathize with 20 people or 1,000 people or 337 million people. Is that currently the population of the United States? It's a lot easier to get emotionally invested in the success or the failure of one person. And so the villain was, in the 90s, it was Bill Gates, right? And for some people, it still is Bill Gates. The villain is the president if he happens to be of the opposite party. The villain is the richest person on the planet or the worst person on the planet or whoever it is, but we like the villain. Mm-hmm. And it's never that simple. There is never one hero or one villain. It's always a community, but we always pick them out. And as soon as Elon falls from his sphere of influence, as soon as he's no longer the person that has this much influence and somebody else is, we'll dump on that guy, and that's the way of it. I think it makes much more sense and is a lot more useful to say, like, if he has these influences, let's just try to influence him, right? Like, let's try to...
You ride that wave a little.
Yeah, like be a part of a community that is trying to do some good instead of just saying that somebody else is the protagonist of this story. That's not reasonable. I don't want somebody else being the protagonist.
It kind of gives me like middle school vibes where we're saying, hey, is he a robber baron or a captain of industry? Right. And we will probably have this discussion for the rest of eternity.
Yeah.
Shortcoats, if you're enjoying our conversation today, I'd be grateful if you'd let people know by posting a story on Instagram or Facebook or tweeting about us. And don't forget to tag us in your post.
Thank you.
This past September 14th, the 2023 Ig Nobel Prizes were awarded for achievements that make people laugh and then make them think, as they say on their website. Let's celebrate this with a pop quiz.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, I love a little quiz.
A little quiz. We are truly in a technological age, as we've been discussing. The Public Health Prize was awarded to Stanford University School of Medicine and Seoul Songdo Hospital researchers who have created a device to monitor your health that analyzes the results of this activity that most people do often and every day. Is it A, eat, B, shower, C, sorry, I forgot which letter I was on, C, blink, or A, or
D,
elimination?
D.
Yeah.
I hope it's elimination.
I'm going with C because everyone's going D.
Oh. An iconoclast.
I'm going blink.
Okay, Elon. So, but the majority says elimination.
I don't even know like what the likelihood of it being D. I just really want it to be D.
It just feels like the kind of thing that would get an Ig Nobel Prize. You know,
okay.
Like, hey, how many times a day do you poop? Like, you know,
what's the firmness? What's the color of it?
Right, I know, and like honestly, that does tell us a lot about our health. So,
yeah.
Well, you're correct. Elimination. The invention is a toilet-mountable device that allows for longitudinal analysis of excreta using pressure and motion sensors, colorimetric assay of urine, flow rate and volume analysis, and stool classification with the Bristol Stool Form Scale.
Whoa. I think this is phenomenal.
They say its performance is comparable to trained medical personnel, and they've really thought of everything. For instance, if you're worried about security, each user is identified both by fingerprint and the distinctive features of their anoderm.
Great.
So basically, they're taking a picture of your butthole.
Yeah. Everybody has a unique star.
Anoderm. That's hilarious.
Is the seat heated and do you get a bidet?
It better be if it's yeah.
I've never had great
Does it talk
experiences
to
with
you?
bidets, but
I mean, I haven't either, but I feel like it should be an option if they're checking out your anoderm.
in case somebody
Right.
thinks this is silly, just a fun fact for all those kids out there that'll never meet me, so I can share this with you. I once sent a picture of my
Anoderm.
elimination
I thought something completely
to my sister, who then yelled at me to go to a hospital, and she was correct, and I was hospitalized for something that she could tell from my elimination, and so that's all I'm going to say about
Is she a
that.
doctor?
Oh,
She's
not going to share
But some
anymore?
things throw out red flags for a lot of people.
Oh.
And,
Yeah, red.
it was not red, actually. Fun fact.
Okay,
yeah.
well,
Did we learn about
you
it?
seem
Yes,
reluctant to
we did.
share.
And when somebody brought it up, I was like, I
I'm
know
reluctant
exactly.
to hear also.
Acolic stool.
Acolic. Oh,
Yeah. It's when your poop is white.
Whoa.
is that like biliary problems?
Yeah, it's liver issues.
Ooh.
Liver or gallbladder, and in my case, it was liver.
Gotcha.
And yeah, just a fun little fact for
That's
the class.
actually kind of
So
interesting.
looking at your elimination could save your life.
Yeah.
Go toilet bros.
All right.
That's actually extremely interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't know that could happen.
A multinational research crew received the Medicine Prize this year. Researchers from the U.S., Canada, Macedonia, Iran, and Vietnam used a cadaveric population in a study to find out if each person has an equal number of what per where. Is it A, wrinkles per hand? Is it B, mites per eyelash?
Whew.
Is it C, hairs per nostril? Or is it D, grams per cubic centimeter?
Well, I think we're
What
all
would they-
comfortable saying that we have varying densities in our bodies.
I'm going with nose hairs.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what
I'm
I-
going with wait, what were they checking again? Like
They just used a cadaveric population to find out if each person has an equal number of
Blank per
what per where.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think
I like
nose
the
hairs.
mites per eyelid though too.
I really did, but then they said cadaveric, and I just
reckon
don't know if we're gonna have as many mites on cadavers.
Right. I kind of
don't
feel the same
know.
way.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with nose hairs.
Go nose hairs too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is great. You guys are really displaying the process of elimination that you go through when you're doing an exam. I love this.
This is how you pass the MCAT class.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hairs per nostril. Patients with alopecia areata often lose their vibrissae, which I didn't know was a thing. That's
Is that a
it's
word
basically
for nose hair?
whiskers, but
Oh.
they use it in for nose hairs as well. Or their nose hairs, which filter particles larger than 3 micrometers from passing through the nasal cavity. And if they lose them, they may be at risk for airborne particle inhalation, and that's kind of bad news, allergies, things like that. The researchers say that surprising, no one has ever before published anything on the anatomical distribution of nose hairs. So
What were their findings?
I didn't care.
Fair.
Just
Can you find out for next time, please?
All right, wait. I'll look it up.
while you're looking it up, pop quiz for the class. Where would you find that people have longer nose hairs? In what type of environment do people tend to have longer nose hairs and thicker?
In Dave Etler's note.
Cold.
Cold makes sense. It's a reasonable
Dusty.
answer.
Yeah.
Dusty makes sense.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be like maybe the desert.
Cities.
Yeah, there's a lot of pollutants.
A lot of pollutants.
I thought you were talking like genetic, like
That
you're
makes perfect sense.
born
That
with-
my question was poorly worded on purpose. I should not be writing.
So you
questions.
can grow like
In a city, huh? You adapt.
Yeah, this is an adaptation. This isn't like a genetic change. This is so much as a.
oh my gosh.
Just
Have
a
you
living
looked at like your
adaptation.
wife's
Interesting.
nose hairs and your kids' nose hairs?
I have not
You
looked
should.
up my wife's nose.
You
She doesn't
should.
care for it when I try.
Nose
so-
hairs are surprisingly gross.
Yeah, people don't care for them.
I mean, they're
I just wish
basically,
that they
like,
would stay
gooey
in my
eyelashes.
nose. The older I
Yeah.
get, the more they start trying to like.
Well, that's why they make the.
You're
little-
Injure into my mustache?
You're close to hair or ear age too.
Oh, can we talk about something for a second?
Yeah.
So
Is it your ear
this
hair?
Kinda, yeah. So this little thing. Oh, sorry. This side too. This little thing right here that like sometimes people get pierced.
tragus.
It's called the tragus.
Yes.
It means goat in Latin because when people get old, particularly men, they grow little hairs out of the outside that looks like a billy goat's chin.
And let me tell you,
That's
why it's called
adorable.
can verify.
Can't verify.
Do you ever look at it and think like, bleh.
Every once in a while, I'll like reach up and like, you know, sort of itch my ear, and then I'll realize that there is like this long hair,
the length of his entire arm just sticking out of his ear.
We have that to look
I
forward
can't find the answer to the question of the.
I've noticed that I am getting thicker hair around my ears.
Yeah, I got
around your ears.
They're not colored yet, which is very nice, and I just shave them off because it's really embarrassing for me.
Yeah.
Oh, don't let it be embarrassing. You are who you are.
Celebrate.
Yeah.
Celebrate your hair.
Celebrate your hairs, dude.
All right, I got one more. Japanese researchers proposed a way of augmenting gustation, the act of tasting.
Mm-hmm.
To do this, they have proposed altering chopsticks and drinking straws using what? Is it A, mouse hairs, C, vibratory motors, B, tiny sharp spikes, or A, electricity?
I think the vibrations. Okay. I don't know why.
We're going to electricity.
Yeah, electricity seems...
Electricity? Okay, what is it?
I don't know the right
What did
answer.
you guys guess?
Electricity. It just seems like fun.
I'm the only one that's going with vibrations.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
Okay, you are wrong. It is electricity. The article from the Proceedings of the Second Augmented Human International Conference says that the researchers experimented with 2 electrified drinking straws so that subjects could taste beverages in the presence of electricity. The experiments were very preliminary, and the researchers only say that the electric drinking straws made it possible to alter taste at different voltages. Now, you know me, I can't just let this. There have to be findings. So if you would reach into that box next to you and take out this experimental apparatus, I know you'll love this, Fallon.
I'm highly concerned.
If you would bring that out, yeah, we've got some little electrical outlet with some straws sticking out of it. Who wants to volunteer?
This can't be the way to go about this, dude.
Look at this.
This is science right here.
I'm not worried about cancer. I'm worried about shocking my tongue.
They're plastic. They're definitely gonna smoke and get all messed up.
He's smelling it.
Do I put it in my mouth?
It's not plugged in.
It's not plugged in.
We could plug it in if you want.
Is that what you want me to do?
Yeah, how did they do that?
No, I think we did.
What kind of apparatus did they use?
Everyone thought
It doesn't say anything.
Standards.
Yes.
There's nothing in this article that
they
says
don't want
anything.
any patent concerns later.
Also,
They're not gonna
why?
tell you how
They don't talk about voltages. They don't talk about,
Yeah, this is a wild
They don't talk about anything.
thing.
And why? Why are you doing
But I'm a
Why?
scientist.
Why is a good
Dave,
question.
you are a really creative person, though.
that? I like that.
It's just trying to make me shock myself.
Well, that's our show, Jeff, Eric, Fallon, Katie. Thanks for being on the show with me today.
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
Happy to be here.
And what kind of shock would it be if I didn't thank you, Shortcoats, for making us a part of your week? If you're new here and you like what you heard today, follow the show wherever fine podcasts are available, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. This episode was produced by yours truly. The show is made possible by a generous donation by Carver College of Medicine student government and ongoing support from the Writing and Humanities program. Our music is by Dr. Vox and Catmosphere. I'm Dave Etler saying don't let the bastards get you down. Talk to you in 1 week. Hi, Shortcoats. Look, life in medical education, life in America, life in the world is often difficult. And I often wish I could help. All I have is this podcast, but in my wildest dreams, you have the support you need to lead a life of your choosing. You deserve to be happy, healthy, and successful in whatever ways you define those words. So if you need support because you've experienced racism, discrimination, harassment, mental health crises, I want you to be able to get the help that you need. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some resources that you can use. But the bottom line is that for what it's worth, I see you. I know you're out there. I wish I could do more. Maybe I can in ways that I don't understand yet or know about. But I see you, and I'm glad you're here, and other people are too. This Short Code podcast is a proud member of the MedEd Media Network. Inspiration, information, and guidance on your journey to medical school and beyond at